Okay, perfect. All right, once again, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Can you guys hear me now? I think this should be good now. I keep forgetting that I have to change the settings on the headphones like before I come in. So let me know if you guys can hear me now. But if you didn't hear what I said in the beginning, the audio should be turned on. Let me know if you can hear me. It should be on. Can you guys hear? Can you guys? If you guys were listening, I just said that I had to change the settings and I guess I got to remember that. I gotta remember that. Shout out to Money Market. Shout out to Joel. Okay, I'm glad you guys can hear me now. So all good. So like I said before, again, welcome to the Lewis Sports Network. If you guys didn't hear me, it's your boy Lewis back once again with another heavy hitter banger with yet another video. Again, make sure to smash the like button. Make sure to hit the subscribe as you guys come in. Make sure you're sharing this on your social media platforms. Make sure you're also sharing it on Reddit. So yeah, I said what I was trying to say was it's been a while since I've shown my face to the public. So I thought, I might as well have done that. Shout out to Ronald since was popping. Shout out to Freddie Gee. What's going on, my man? What's going on? So, uh, the last time you guys saw me, if you guys see me with hair, I had hair. My hair pretty much ran away from not only my face, from my head. So your boy had to get yourself a cut and had to show off the new look to my subs, to the audience out there on the Lewis Sports Network. So, hey man, this is your boy, and I came back with it, man. So just had to give you an update just to see what your boy looks like, and here he is, man. So let's get into this video. But again, keep liking, keep subscribing, keep sharing. All right, on to the video. So this video is basically talking about the expansion era, and also talking about obviously Wilt Chamberlain and the competition that he quote unquote went or didn't go up against. Let me just say this about Wilt Chamberlain. Definitely, it ain't I'm feeling silky smooth. I am silky smooth. There's a difference with that, man. There's a difference between feeling and actuality. And actuality, feeling silky smooth. But anyway, back to the video. So like I was saying, so yeah, getting to Wilt Chamberlain, he is definitely one of, obviously, in my opinion, I know people say Shaq is the most dominant because of players when they were born. I shouldn't say players. Well, you could say players, but obviously fans of the game who saw Shaq play will say that he's the most dominant because he's the most dominant that they've ever seen. But I think that Wilt Chamberlain topped Shaq as the most dominant player ever, even though the argument is going to be that, Shaq really didn't play against, I mean, not Wilt didn't play really anybody special. He went up against what, 6'5", 6'6" white guys in his era. Now, with Bill Russell, it is a little bit it is a little bit crazy that for a center he only shot 44%, especially when he was known as mostly a layup and dunk person. Because Wilt Chamberlain was the same way. He did do little mini fadeaways in highlights that I saw him play when he played in the 60s. Like he would do these little mini fadeaway jumpers that he would put in the paint. But Wilt obviously had dominant scoring seasons, and he shot the ball obviously extremely well, despite the fact that obviously pretty much most of his attempts are from 0 to 3 feet. So I get all that, but I find it strange that Bill Russell shot 44%, because I would have thought he would have at least made 50% of his baskets for his career, but it was only 44%, which is interesting. But obviously, so we're gonna go to Wilt Chamberlain. Looking at his stats, he is known as Wilt the Stilt, the Big Dipper, Dippy Dip, the Load, Big Musty, the Record Book. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The man had 7 nicknames. Uh, and his name Wilt is short for his actual name, Wilton. So Wilt is short for Wilton. Wilton Norman Chamberlain from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. He actually got to play for his hometown team. Like, how crazy is that, right? Um, oh man, that's crazy. Uh, you know, so I had to do some research myself just to kind of dispel the notion that Wilt went up against these quote unquote white guys that he went up against in the 60s. So it's really not true. Wilt went up against a lot of great centers in the NBA during his time period. And yeah, it was an 18 league. So yeah, the teams were actually more stacked during that time. You looking great on my new 4K TV? Damn, wow, I look that much more impressive in 4K. Shout out to you, Jermaine. Damn, look at that. Again, smash the like, hit that subscribe. Money Mark says Shaq was more dominant actually. He had nice footwork for a big man and had dominated players his own size. Oh no, there's no question about that. Shaq was pretty dominant. I just don't think he was as dominant as Wilt Chamberlain. That's all I'm saying. Shaq was dominant for his time, but I don't think he was as dominant as Wilt Chamberlain. And I didn't even see Wilt play. I saw Shaq play, obviously, but I mean, the records speak for themselves, man. I see y'all 70 inch. He's the gentle giant. Oh man, Wilt played in the little man's era. Shaq played in an era that included 7-foot centers in the Hall of Fame. Well, Wilt Chamberlain also played with 7-foot centers as well. See, that's why I said that we got to dispel this notion that he played with just a bunch of white guys. Wilt played in an era against dominant big men too, not just Shaq. Not just Shaq. And the crazy part is when Shaq was in his prime years and well with the Lakers, the center position really has started to die down by the 2000s. I would say more so. Dang, if we really honestly talking, dang, it was really starting to dwindle. I would probably say maybe like around the mid 2000s, going into the 2010s, was really starting to go down. All right, man. If we so there I go, and let me just go to the overlay real quick because had to find my boy. Where is he at? Did I down? Oh wow, look at that. I downloaded these, but I didn't even put. All right, so we got 9 people watching right now. Let me just before I continue, let me just check real quick. All right, so we got 9 people watching. We got 9 likes in the building. Let's get the views and let's get the likes up. All right, let's go. Freddie Gee, nah, it's 65, but I love it. Awesome. Giants always rule the NBA. That 65 is special, man. I got one, but no 4K though. 7 centers who were inducted to the Hall of Fame more than any era. Are you talking about during Shaq's era or are you talking about during Wilt's era? All right, keep going, man. Let's smash that like. Jermaine says that the average center was 6'9" in Wilt's era. Let me see. Jermaine says Wilt actually was pretty good at track and field. I heard Bill Russell was as well. I'm gonna let Lou name them off, but Wilt played against hella Hall of Famers at center who were tall. Keyword tall. All right. So this whole notion that he didn't go against great centers in his time. I'm gonna actually name you some centers he went up against. In a second. Uh, Wilt was actually pretty good. Well, Freddie says he's gonna let Lou do it. All right. So he's talking about Shaq's era. Ron says it may have not faced very good centers in the beginning. Shout out to Sly. Trust me, in the beginning of his career, but then came players like Bill Russell, Walt Bellamy, Nate Thurman. Good point, Ron. Money Mark says Shaq's era. Sly says, shout out to Sly. Shaq didn't dog his competition like that till the three-peat era. In Orlando, he was much more beatable. And remember what I was talking about with Shaq in terms of the competition he went up against in terms of the big men from power forwards to centers. When it came to going up against guys like Tim Duncan, Hakeem Olajuwon, excuse me, because in '94, let's see, the best player on that team was Reggie Miller. '95 was Hakeem, that's center. '96 was Jordan, so that's 2 guards to 1 center. Then '97 was Karl Malone, power forward. He was the MVP. In '98, he lost to Karl Malone again, who finished second in MVP to Michael Jordan. There's that. Then you have '99, he lost to Tim Duncan. So all of those before the 2000 season. Uh, but don't spoil it, bro. Let the haters get blindsided by the knowledge. Here it comes. Olajuwon, Ewing, David Robinson, Alonzo Mourning, Dikembe Mutombo, Shaq. Yep, but watch what I do here. All right. So Wilt Chamberlain, I'm gonna read the article. Unfortunately, gets carried around about this myth that he never played against good competition. Now I understand that we were in an 18 league. There was more extra possessions in the 60s, but it's a misconception. the numerous great big men that he played against. There's Bill Russell. There's Nate Thurman. Oh, is that John Havlicek? Yeah. Do people forget about the great Willis Reed? He's in the Hall of Fame. So is Nate Thurman. So is Bill Russell. Walt Bellamy. He's also in the Hall of Fame. For his career, Walt Bellamy, check this out. In 1962, Walt Bellamy averaged 31.6 points, 19 rebounds per game, and 2.7 assists game in 1962. For Walt's career, he averaged 20 points and 13.7 rebounds in his career, with nearly a solid 3 assists at the center position. Walt Bellamy, he's in the Hall of Fame. Zelmo Beatty from the St. Louis Hawks. I believe he is supposed to be, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Zelmo Beatty is, I believe he's 7 feet tall, if I'm not mistaken. Let me look up his height real quick. He was 6'9". Okay, he was 6'9". He was 6'9", 225. Let's look at Walt Bellamy. Walt Bellamy was 6'11". All right, that's pretty good. Walt Bellamy was pretty good. Let me just look up. Okay, Beatty was 6'9". Wayne Embry. Let me look him up. Wayne Embry was 6'8", 240 pounds. But some of these centers were actually, they were actually pretty heavy. Some of these centers were heavy. Okay, so you have him. We have Bob Lanier. And I know Nate Thurman was one of the more stronger centers in the league. Nate was 6'11" as well. And Nate Thurman is in the Hall of Fame. We have he also went up against Wes Unseld as well. That's another center, even though he was only 6'7". Let me take a look at Dave Cowens. Oh, he was drafted in the 70s. Okay, but he was actually pretty good at 6'9" at the center position. Or did he play power forward? No, he played both power forward and center. So just giving a couple so far. 6'9" is not that short though. And don't forget Kareem Abdul-Jabbar as well. People have got to remember him. That's a low-key, shout out to low-key T in the building. Wilt is all over the record books offensively. I never understood that. How did they play 40-plus minutes every night, score that many points, and grab that many rebounds? All of the centers from Shaq's era, except Mourning, were the only ones who weren't 7 feet. He was 6'10". But it's really not that much difference, man. Not really less talented era. Money Mark, dudes are really fouling out there. Mainly a white man's league. Freddie G, that's because they didn't know how to play defense. Never said nothing about the talent, but the physicality was real. I wouldn't say that the 60s in terms of centers were, I would say, as talented as the centers in Shaq's era, but it was definitely physical. So we can't say that they didn't. Yeah, you can't say that. And I'm gonna get into Wilt stats because it just shows you. Let me just look. Let me just go back real quick. So there was Andre Russell as well. Oh, look, Nate Thurman, Walt Bellamy are known as the top centers in the 60s, along with Willis Reed. You know, because he kind of gets, the short end of the stick, saying that he played in a very weak era, which is not true. Okay, let me tell you. Okay, let me look at this now. So I'm gonna read this real quick and let you guys know right here. Well, George Mikan, unfortunately, he did not play in Wilt's era. Well, Mikan was the first superstar, though. I mean, you have to use your size. You gotta take advantage, man. Now, Wilt was 7'1", Kareem was 7'2". Yeah, Kareem was 7'2". That's correct. Bob Pettit is, I believe, six. I believe he was 6'9", 6'10". George Mikan, he's another guy who's in the Hall of Fame. Mikan did not play his 7'2" by accident. Fingers too big. um, Let me just upload some thumbnails because I really forgot to put the great Wilt Chamberlain on here. So there's actually some centers I was able to look up, and so I'm gonna basically put that to show the type of centers that he went up against. Talented, yes, but how did Wilt's ever average more points and rebounds? That's just weird. It's funny. Let me get to the reading of the article, ladies and gentlemen. All right, so getting started. Check this out. So there was an article on Bleacher Report, and they were comparing Wilt's era to Shaq's era, which is funny. So let me just read it before I continue. So here's the thing. Wilt began his career in 1959, right? The 24-second shot clock was already introduced in 1954. The 3-second rule was already introduced in 1936. Illegal defense had already been in the league since 1947. Defensive goaltending was instituted way back during George Mikan, who Freddie mentioned in the chat, during his college days, the pre-50s. So this was when the NBA was, pretty much a baby at this point. Offensive goaltending was instituted during Russell's last year in college in 56. So this is before Russell was drafted. So now it says Wilt played with all of these rules into effect when he came into the league in 1959. So now it's going to say because everybody else were weak 6'6" white centers that Wilt played against. Okay. Wilt was so strong that he could dominate them with ease. Let's compare the so-called strongest player ever, Shaq, to Wilt. Wilt never broke a rim in an NBA game as far as I know, which I've never seen. I know Shaq has broken quite a few rims, which tells you how strong Shaq is. That doesn't mean that he couldn't have done it if he didn't want to. Shaq set out to do what he did. He deliberately pulled all of his weight into the dunks for the express purpose of getting himself on SportsCenter. I would say maybe he did, maybe he didn't. Who knows? Okay. Funny. So they're talking about when Arnold Schwarzenegger, everybody knows who Arnold is, Mr. Terminator, as I like to call him. When he first came into the U.S., it says that Wilt used to actually work out with him. So Wilt was able to bench press up to 500 pounds. Shaq could only bench press about 450, and Shaq has more mass than Wilt. But I think Wilt probably has more natural strength if I'm thinking about the fact that he could bench press 50 more pounds than Shaq can. When Wilt was 59 years old, he was still able to bench press 465, which is more than Shaq has ever been able to do. Wilt was 63 when he passed away. And the crazy part is that there's so many stories that we hear about Wilt Chamberlain. People who lived during his time could probably tell you more than somebody who's never seen him play or who's never met him. So I don't really know if those things are true or not, but they sound pretty amazing though. They sound pretty amazing, right? Kareem went up against less talent. That's why he scored more. I saw him play. He was one of the strongest players I've ever seen. I saw him go up with two guys hanging on his shoulders and slammed it, scattering both players. I heard he did that. It was in a Wilt Chamberlain documentary. Jermaine says, "Sang, you must be older than me." Dang, Shaq would have abused Wilt. You think so? I don't know. Moses Malone is better than Alonzo and Dikembe. Moses is arguably better than Shaq. David and Olajuwon. He's just disrespected. I agree. Nah, man, I don't see that happening. Wilt was in a Conan movie. I believe Conan the Destroyer. Moses was a beast, but he's not better than the Dream. Shaq was the polished Daryl Dawkins that NBA managed to make money off of. He had the okay. Shaq was the polished Daryl Dawkins. Huh. All right, ladies and gentlemen, continue to like and continue to hit the subscribe as I continue reading the article, ladies and gentlemen. So it says, did you ever see Charles Barkley play? If not, I'm sure you've seen a video of him. Barkley was listed at 6'6", 252. Very, very strong, very, very fast and explosive. And it's true. When you look at Charles Barkley, he was one of the more explosive power forwards of his time. For somebody at his weight to move so quick like he did, in the 60s and early 70s, there was a player in the NBA by the name of Gus Johnson. He was kind of the Charles Barkley of his time, but he was 6'6", but weighed about 230 pounds. So for those who know Gus Johnson was kind of the Charles Barkley of his time. Shout out to Clay Pro in the building. And so again, make sure y'all smash the like, hit the subscribe. We're talking about the great Wilt Chamberlain. I just think for the fact that you're able to average 30 points and 23 rebounds for your career is pretty remarkable. And Wilt went against great centers. Wilt went up against great centers. And as we talk about, there's Wilt, there's Shaq, and there's Kareem. Kareem could definitely dunk the basketball, but I felt like Kareem was more of a finesse player. Like I said, shout out to everybody in the chat. We're talking about Wilt Chamberlain, and then I'll get into the expansion era, which, well, when we have to talk about these basketball teams, in terms of the expansion era that they played in compared to winning their championships, don't forget that Wilt was fit. Not only was he strong, but he was fast and pretty agile. Yeah, if you look at Wilt, he had such a long stride. I mean, look, the man competed in track and field. Like I said, the man was just he was very long too. If you look at Wilt and how tall he is, he was very, you know, his wingspan was huge. Sometimes the student is better than the teacher. Yeah, Barkley was an athletic bull. Shout out to Watchful News in the building. Exactly. Don't forget, exactly. Money Mark says, G Money, Will had 30 and 23 because he played against smaller guys. The average center was 6'8" and he was 7'1". Will just needed to work on his free throws. He shot 54 at the line. His highest was his last year in the league when he shot 73 and 73, which was, I think, the last time he actually went to the finals. Wilt is still, wonder if he got that name from the court or the bedroom. Well, you already know the thing on Wilt. The crazy notion is people say that players stat chase. Do you know how hard it is to get stats with the best of the best? Does anyone have Wilt Chamberlain in their top 10? Just wondering. I actually do. He's 10th. He's 10th on my list. I don't know who else has Wilt Chamberlain in their top 10. The only reason I don't put Wilt as high as the rest of the guys on my list is because of the fact that he only won 2 NBA championships in 6 tries because he went to 6 finals. Yes, he had to go up against Bill Russell. Understand that. But there's been stories of people saying that Wilt, when he would sacrifice his numbers for the good of the team, he won 2 championships. When he didn't do that, for the most part, they lost. Yeah, they said Wilt could have been an Olympic jumper. G Money says that he has Wilt on his top 10. He has him at number 3. Money Mark says Wilt was the most athletic center ever, though. Yeah, he was more athletic than Shaq, obviously more athletic than Kareem. So yeah, so we were talking about Gus Johnson, who people were saying that he was the Charles Barkley of his time. And Gus was actually able to dunk on Wilt, and they said that this was in a regular season game in the '67 season. That was the year when the Sixers had the best record, I think, of all time at the time. They won 68 and 13, and Wilt play for Hall of Fame coach Alex Hannum. Let me see. So when he dunked on Wilt, Wilt wasn't too happy about it. So then in that same game, Gus went over for a fast break, and Wilt was the only player back. And then Wilt was able to grab the ball from him, even when Gus had a perfect 45-degree angle to try to dunk the ball again. Wilt just went up and he just grabbed it from him. So that tells you that Wilt had big hands, which, Wilt can palm the ball. Wilt was a former Harlem Globetrotter. Uh, it was almost like what couldn't Wilt do? Like the stories about the 20,000 women, that he possibly slept with is crazy. Like that man was full of energy. It was like you kind of wonder what was Wilt made of, you know? Like it's crazy. Like I've never heard of anything like that, man. Uh, Watchful News says I got Wilt in the top 10. Wilt was in better shape than Shaq. Kobe would have never had to mention weight or die issues with Wilt. That's true. Yeah, I have Wilt in my top 10. Might have to put him higher. But as far as skill wise, the Dream had the best skills of any center. No, that's absolutely true. That I agree with. And I would say he was skilled from his footwork. And the thing is, he could score outside the paint, something that Wilt was never really good at. Wilt had the talent, just not the drive. Yeah, I have Wilt at 6. The Big Dipper, no doubt. I have him at 6. Okay, I have him at 10. Yeah, Wilt couldn't shoot. And like I said, when it came to like post moves, Will was more about power when it came to post moves. So it was about power. I remember you didn't really get to see the low post moves and the footwork really up until the 80s. Kevin McHale, especially at the power forward spot. I remember Gus Johnson. He put the Baltimore Bullets with Earl Monroe and Wes Unseld. Yep. And like I said, from what I heard, Gus was very good at going coast to coast from one end to the other of the floor. Gus was very good at that. Again, guys, smash the like, hit the subscribe button for the Louis Sports Network, giving you content on Wilt Chamberlain. Uh, how dominant he was, and the notion that he didn't go up against any competition. And look, the man went up against a young Kareem. Like that's crazy, right? And then looking at Wilt averaged 50. I don't care who he played against. That's 50. He said that man had 50. Now, if you look at this is a picture of his 100-point game. First quarter, 23 points, 7 of 14 from the field, 9 of 9 at the free throw line. Second quarter, 18 points, 7 of 12 from the field, 4 of 5 at the free throw line. Third quarter, 28 points, 10 of 16 from the field, 8 out of 8 from the free throw line. Fourth quarter, 31 points, 12 of 21 from the field, 7 out of 10 from the free throw line. The man shot no lower than 70% from the line, and he had a 9 for 9 in the first quarter. That's impressive. And then look, his totals: 100 points, 36 out of 63 from the field, and 28 out of 32 from the free throw line. So if we do those percentages, ladies and gentlemen, let me just check real quick. If we do those percentages, smash the like, hit that subscribe. And just for a little disclaimer here, tomorrow's going to be 68 degrees. That sounds great. Wish it could be in the 70s and stuff, but Adonai, shout out to Adonai. He says there was competition, just not enough for him. And if you're looking at that 62 season, wow, he had 61 against the St. Louis Hawks, 26 against Boston, 67 against New York, 65 against Philadelphia. He had 4 against Chicago, against St. Louis, I should say. I'm bad. 65 against St. Louis, 61 against Chicago, 100 against New York, 58 in New York. That was a home and home. He had 30 against the Celtics. But look, he had 3 in 5 out of 6 games. Wilt scored 60 or more. Wow. Money Mark says, and shout out to Ron, he says, Gus was very athletic, house, and strong. Money Mark says, in order for any player to be in my top 10, they have to be able to shoot the ball from every area on the court. That's why Wilt is not in my top 10. Okay, so your top 10 criteria has to do with being able to shoot anywhere from the court. Wait a minute, but Kareem was mostly around the basket. I mean, yeah, he could shoot his sky hook, but he wasn't really normally a jump shooter. I mean, God bless that sky hook, man, that it was able to propel him to a 20-year career. There was competition, just not for him. And again, shout out to Adona. Dude scored 100 points in the game in the most dominant league in the world. Just think if Curry gets 3 more rings and 1 more MVP, which is highly possible, we will be forced to put him in the top 10. Let's see how his stats match up. And the thing is, Curry's a point guard right now, which is crazy. Money Mark. Shaq would have scored 50 in Wilt's era, ever. No Shaq either. Money Mark. During that era, scoring in the paint was the game plan. That's why we got to put errors into this perspective. He couldn't average 50 against the Nets or Pacers, since you brought it up. 2 white boys, mind you. I don't think that he could average 50. I don't think Shaq would be able to average 50. By that criteria, then you don't have any big men. That's true. Shaq could have scored 100 in a game in that era. Also, Wilt was a giant playing against midgets. And that's what we're getting at. Nah, I can't say that by that logic. Like I said, a pretty good big men in his time. Okay, so it says that Gus Johnson always attacked the basket with reckless abandon, pretty much like LeBron does. If you can imagine anyone dislocating LeBron's shoulder while blocking the shot, that's what it was when Wilt did that to Gus. Another time, Wilt broke an opponent's toe with a dunk. He dunked on one time and the ball hit the floor, hit the foot of Hall of Famer Johnny Red Kerr, which was forced that he broke it. Kerr immediately knew what happened as soon as the ball hit his foot, but he didn't want anybody to know that Wilt's dunk broke it, so he pretended to trip on his way up the court so that fans would think he accidentally broke his foot. It wasn't until after he got to the locker room that he confessed that it was Wilt's dunk that ended up breaking the bone in his foot. Wilt was definitely stronger than Shaq, although Shaq is a lot heavier because he has a lot more fat, more mass than Wilt did. Shaq's excess fat has a negative effect on his stamina. That's why when you run on Shaq, Shaq can easily get tired, but that was because he put on more mass, so he got more heavier. Wilt averaged 46 minutes a game over the course of his career, and in 1962, Wilt only sat out 8 minutes of the entire season. He was ejected with 2 technicals with 8 minutes to go in one game, but played every minute, including overtimes, of each of the other 79 games that season. As a result of playing more minutes in overtime than he sat out during regulation, he averaged 48 and a half minutes, ladies and gentlemen, that year, even though the regulation game is only 48 minutes. So that would kind of be like a per 100 stat if you were to look at it in today's analytics. Shaq has only had one season in which he averaged 40 minutes a game. He's never been a conditioning fanatic. And remember, when we talk about the greatest players of all time, a lot of people who vote for these great players, they tend to favor the perimeter players. Why? Because of the fact that centers, they stay in the paint, and it's not the most attractive position in basketball. So because a lot of people favor wings, is the reason that wings get more love when it comes to the top 10 than centers do. When you don't consider centers the greatest ever, especially because they'll also say that how did the centers win? Centers won when they were paired with a great wing player, whether it's a forward or whether it's a guard. That's why guards and forwards get more love when it comes to all-time great lists than big men. And when you look at a guy like Bill Russell, it's amazing to me that he only shot 44%, considering, yeah, Shaq wasn't fat in the beginning of his career. That's true. He was not. He was obviously much more leaner. He was a lean, 300 pounds, 3 to 315. But yeah, during that era, yeah, that it's true. And that's what I also respect about the players that played on that time too. What people need to also understand is a lot of these dudes were playing in Chucks. Bill Russell played in Chuck Taylors, which is crazy. You can't play in Chucks in today's game. There's just no way. These dudes were hooping in Chuck Taylors, man. That's crazy. I got to give those guys respect. Shout out to the king in the building. Who would Curry supplant in the top 10, man? He doesn't remove anybody. Shaq was going against big men. Will wasn't. Hakeem could shoot from all over. Money Mark. So do you have Shaq in your top 10? Shout out to the king. He says one thing that makes Wilt a beast is his conditioning. Exactly. Definitely not. Go look at the rosters, man. There was plenty of people that were 6'10" and up. Leroy Ellis, that's right. John Thompson, Mel Counts, that's right. Good thing you mentioned those names because I was just about to mention those names as well. That's fine if he does. I'm just wondering because most people list have at least 3 GOAT bigs in the top 10. And if you look at the list that I've got, Tim Duncan, that's 1. Hakeem Olajuwon, that's 2. You have Shaq, that's 3. You got Wilt, that's 4. You got Russell and Kareem. Look at that. 6 centers are in my top 10 on my list. I have 3 perimeter players and 1 point guard. The 3 perimeter players, that's LeBron James, Michael Jordan, and Larry Bird in my top 10. 1 point guard in Magic Johnson, and the other 6 players are 1 is a power forward and the other 5 are centers. That's crazy. That's crazy. But like I said, people would favor wings in the top 10 because, again, they look at big men and say that they weren't very successful until they won with with a 2 guard or with a 3. A 2 or a 3 propelled them to be able to win championships. But Shaq wasn't fat. That's true. What I respect about it, yep, I can. Shaq went against Rick Smith and Tom McCulloch in the NBA Finals. He didn't average 40. Those are white boys, brother. You can't knock Will for it then, which is crazy. Hoping it's some Chuck Taylors. Let me just check. Yep. Shaq wasn't the only offense on that team. You forget Penny and Nick Anderson, man. Shaq was an selfish player. That era of Wilt never gets enough credit. Yep. Due to 6'10" players shooting and dribbling outside. Yep. Skill-wise, Shaq had more skills. Actually, I never sat down and made a list, but all I know is LeBron is not in my top 5 compared to most lists. I'm talking about the Lakers. He went against white boys, but didn't average 40. Will did. And remember, Shaq's in the modern era. LeBron is not in my top 110. We already know that. That's fair. Who did Shaq go against? Money Mark, Rick Smith, and Tom McCulloch. From what Freddie Gee is telling you, it's his finals competition. Money Mark, that's a good one. I love it. Wilt was probably more skilled than Shaq since they weren't allowed to be as physical in the 60s compared to the 90s, because if Wilt was backing down like Shaq did, it would be an offensive foul. Interesting point, King G. Shaq went up against more talent. Money Mark, you all over the place, man. He says, Jermaine. Adonai says, is Larry Bird in your top 10 because of his impact? Remember, he was a terrible defender. No, he wasn't a terrible defender. He was a solid defender. Larry Bird isn't in my top 10. He's number 5 on my list. Larry Bird is number 5 on my list. Larry Bird made 3 second-team All-NBA defense. What Larry Bird didn't have was athleticism. He didn't have lateral quickness, and Larry Bird was not fast. He has those. Larry Bird is making first-team All-NBA defense because he was not a bad defender. So Wilt was kind of forced to rely on his skill more than Shaq. Shaw went against some of the best bigs: Tim Duncan, Shaq, Kevin Garnett, Dirk, Patrick Ewing, Olajuwon, David Robinson, Yao Ming. Clay Pro says 1 Jordan, 2 Kareem, 3 Magic, 4 Kobe, 5 Hakeem, 6 Wilt, 7 Moses, Larry Bird 8th, LeBron 9th, and Tim Duncan. And he put Tim Duncan with the 5 rings. Okay, at first I was going to say, oh, you don't have Larry Bird in your top 10? But no, he does have him at number 8. But he put in Moses Malone. That means that Bill Russell is not in your top 10, Clay Pro. Okay. He never played Rick Smith in the finals. Money Mark, yes, he did in 2000. In 2000, he went up against Rick Smith. What are you talking about? Shaq and Tim tied at 10 for me. Oh, okay. I'm surprised you didn't put Slash. Oh, Lee says Larry Bird in the top 5. You say Wilt played against white boys, but Shaq couldn't average 40 against Rick Smith and Tom McCulloch. And we know that he never averaged 50 against the Dream, Patrick Ewing, or David Robinson, etc. The funny thing is, Wilt's got players that he went up against that are in the Hall of Fame right now. That's crazy. Let me just check. Again, guys, make sure to smash the like button and hit the subscribe button, man, for your boy, Louis Sports Network. We're talking about Wilt Chamberlain. Talking about the great Wilt Chamberlain. Much love and respect to him. Looking at his career, this guy won 11 rebounding titles, 7-time scoring champ, 13-time All-Star, 10 All-NBA teams, 2-time NBA champion, 2-time All-Defensive Team, was the MVP of the 1960 All-Star Game, 4-time regular season MVP. He was the Finals MVP in 1972. He was the Rookie of the Year in 1960. He played for 5 different teams in his career and is obviously in the Hall of Fame. Let me get back into the article. Secondly, Shaq is good, but he's not Wilt. Secondly, the 60s era in which Wilt played was actually a more physical era. There were no sissy, flagrant, or handshake fouls during the time. Refs allowed those physical tactics go unpunished because the owners and the NBA management believed that blood and violence was what brought people to basketball games back then. So that was the thinking during that time. So superstar players like Wilt received no favorable treatment from the refs, and in fact, refs often sided with the opposing team against Wilt because they felt that he was simply too dominating. And yes, Wilt was doing this in an 18-team league until the NBA began to expand. So it says the NBA enacted the rules to stop Wilt somehow, which is a conversation that he had with MJ during the 97 All-Star game when he told MJ that they changed the rules for me to not dominate, and they changed the rules for you so that you can so that you be able to dominate. From what Wilt said to Michael, and these are stories that I kept hearing all over the time, all the time. If you could, and they're on some YouTube videos, but I got to give respect. I know he just ran into Bill a lot, but Bill Russell was on stacked teams. His Celtics were stacked. Them dudes had, at the time that he finished retiring, this dude had what, 11 to 12 Hall of Famers. That's crazy. Oh, Clyde Lovelet of the Boston Celtics knocked a couple of Wilt's front teeth into the roof of his mouth on one play. Wilt suffered an infection, and the teeth were never set properly in the operation, and that caused Wilt to live with a good deal of pain for the rest of his life. So I didn't even know about this story. Wilt was actually supposed to have surgery on his teeth because he lived with the teeth that were knocked out from Clyde Lovelet. He actually lived with that from the time that he retired, from the time that he played from that game all the way to, until he was 63 years old, because Wilt died at 63. So it said that the injury was aggravated later that year by Willie Knowles of the Knicks. Tommy Heinsohn of the Celtics also was involved into some very rough shots of Wilt. Unfortunately for Wilt, he was not in a position to retaliate. Any double ejection would be an unequal trade, and Wilt was not a mean guy to begin with. The physical play was so rough against him that Wilt actually retired after his rookie year. He wrote a piece for Look magazine about the NBA being a Bush league, but the Warriors owner talked him into coming back. That was, I believe, the Philadelphia Warriors, and which then became the San Francisco Warriors, which we now know today love as the Golden State Warriors, even though Wilt was ready to hang it up. So it says, over the years, many referees, and I'll check the chat in a bit, the referees have admitted that they let guys get away with clobbering Wilt on the offensive end. The league really didn't know how to handle Wilt, and subconsciously, the refs let the little guys get away with murder. In earlier years, they did this to make up for the fact that Wilt was so big and talented. In later years, they did this because they felt sorry for Wilt because he couldn't shoot free throws very well. One ref told Wilt, I know you get hacked every time, but the game when you go 1-on-2 from the line every time down the court. Third, the average height of the NBA centers in Wilt's day was not 6'8" or 6'9", it was 6'10". Wilt towered a mere 3 inches over the opposition. Darrell Imhoff, the center against whom he dropped the 100 points, is 6'10". Bill Russell, the second best rebounder in league history, and the center which he grabbed the record-setting 55 rebounds, but the Celtics won the game by 3 points is also 6-10. You don't see Yao Ming endangering these records, even though he has a 4-inch advantage over your average centers today. Besides, Walter Dukes is 7'1". Swade Halbrook is 7'3". Mel Counts is 7 feet tall. How come none of these 60s players put up the same numbers as Wilt did? Height is not the reason for Wilt's domination, which leads us to number 4. That the main reason as Wilt dominated is because of the black and white. Short and tall is because he is a superb physical specimen, even with the substandard 60s training methods and nutrition of his time. As a matter of fact, Sports Illustrated in 1986, they described Wilt as the finest athletic construction made of flesh and blood. Look at that. Not even through the article, we got 17 comments in that comment section. And like I said, Shaq did go on some talents though, no question. Adonis, man, in my top 3, MJ, Magic, Larry, favorite players, and he's the best small forward in my opinion. I never studied Bill Russell. He was very slow-footed. The guys he defended, like Bernard King, Dominique Wilkins, Terry Cummings, and many torched him when he defended. Yeah, he was slow-footed, but it didn't mean that he was not a solid defender though. Okay, Weiss has got Jordan, Kareem, Magic, Larry, LBJ, Kobe, Shaq, Duncan, Olajuwon, and Wilt for his top 10. Wilt was so dominant the NBA had to implement rules just to make it harder for him. Money Mark has left the chat to go to Google. LeBron before Olajuwon and Kobe. That's what I'll be saying. Google it up, man. Come back with some work. Wow. I think Shaq is greater, but not better. I penalize Wilt for being a notorious loser. Bird was great shooting, passing, and rebounding, and his IQ made up for what he lacked athletically. That's facts, Jermaine. That's why I got him in the top 5. That's a lie, though. MJ dominated more before the rules changed. He averaged 37, 35, and 33. But you got to understand that those are the 80 rules that Jordan played under in. Rules were changing even before that. I forgot about the 2000 finals. I believe Bird was great for the league, but because what he lacked showed tremendously, but I won't deny his greatness offensively, including his assists. I mean, the man averaged 6 assists for his career in a system. Bill Russell's not even top 50 in scoring. Yeah, that's crazy. I'm all for not being athletic, but in basketball, that's too vital to me. Larry was a good team defender like Magic. I agreed about athleticism being important. Freddie Gee, but a top 5 player in the NBA now is not athletic, and Steph Curry. Hilarious, Jermaine. You hide and Bird with your statement. But I'm about to slide and chill with the wife. Y'all be easy and stay safe out here. Salute to Lou in the chat. Peace out, Freddie. Peace out. Bird was a beast before he got hurt. 99 to the fella. 99 to Freddie Gee. That's true. Are y'all joking when putting Bill Russell in the top 10? I don't understand what's so special about him. I mean, he was a great defensive player. Y'all got to watch some film on Larry Joe Bird. He used to hustle his butt off. Oh, I know. Dennis Rodman was a great rebounder also. Between Bill Russell and Wilt Chamberlain, they are the reason the NBA is a billion, trillion-dollar industry as far as money made, especially for the so-called African Americans are concerned. That's a great point. That's a great point. All right, man. Olajuwon was a great, great player. That's absolutely true. I'm going to go spend time with the wife. Also, have a good night, everyone. Louis, I gave your video a like. I'll see you later. Appreciate it, Money Mark. All right, take care, my man. Have a wonderful night with the wife. Same thing with you, Freddie Gee. All right, man. We are smashing that like and we are hitting that subscribe button, man, for the Louis Sports Network. We are talking about, again, Wilt Chamberlain. We're talking about the expansion era as well. Let me just check if this is, let me just check some more Wilt. There we go. There's my man, Wilt. Bill Russell is the most overrated player in any sport. Well, we could just stick to basketball for that one. I hope y'all know being athletic doesn't just apply to how high your vertical is. Oh, I know that. A lot of things take into account just athleticism, man. It's not just your athletic, which is very true. That's right. Keep smashing that like and keep hitting that subscribe. It's true, man. And don't forget, Dave Cowens was another player that was very good. Bob Pettit, power forward slash center, top 50 player. We mentioned about Johnny Ray Kerr and Zelon Beatty, top centers of the 50s, 60s. No one ever locked him up, but Bill Russell played him as well as anyone. Also, I heard Nate Thurman also played him well. Again, Bob Lanier also played in Wilt's era as well. Oh, that's right. We can't forget about Elvin Hayes. I did mention about Walt Bellamy, obviously Nate Thurman. There was some pretty great centers in his time. They just don't, again, they don't get enough recognition. Yeah, it's just that Wilt, once he got older, he wasn't as effective as he once was, and it happens with everybody. So when Wilt was not that offensive dominant player he was anymore, I mean, he did become a better, he became more of a defensive player. And he really looked to incorporate his teammates. But like I said, when he did that, he won. That's the key. And Bill Russell was really standing in his way when it came to Wilt possibly winning more championships. Because remember, him and Bill played in the same conference. It's true. He's really faced some of the best big men to ever play in the game. I just think that sometimes that we could kind of get so in love with the 90s though. We kind of fall in love with that, man. And now the like button again. Shout out for smashing that like button. So I just want to give respect to Will Chamberlain because you know Wilt doesn't get enough credit for the dominant player that he was. And if you look at his field goal percentage, it's crazy. I mean, the man had twice. He had he had three thousand point seasons, 4,029 in that historic 62 season, and his field goal percentage. I mean, even Will is crazy. His rookie season, he only shot 46% from the field in 72 games, but he would average 50% the next 5 seasons. Then you have Then he went down to 49% in the 65 season, then went back up to 52, 54, 68. And then after that, Will Chamberlain pretty much averaged 50% or better the rest of his career. So from 1965 to retirement, he went one, two, wait, he went one, two, actually one, actually, no, wait, my mistake. He actually went He actually went from his second season all the way until retirement. Will shot better than 50% from the field. He shot 60% from the field 3 different times. Two 60% seasons and then 172%. But obviously everybody knows his basket was from 0 to 3 feet. Like I said, amazing stride, slender, tall, athletic, strong. To say Curry's not athletic isn't the case. 2005 Bobcats was compared to the top players in the NBA. Russell wasn't a great scorer, but his defense and rebounding impacted the game, and he was the X factor for those. Yeah, that's the reason why I have him. Defense and rebounding. Will could arguably be 3 through 7 of the greatest of all time. Yep, you can make an argument. No, Bird was bad in my opinion. Very iconic, and he and Magic helped the NBA become what it is before Michael Jordan came into the league. We need a Sonics franchise to come back. Ron, I get that, but those Celtics teams are overrated as well. Ron, so was Draymond Green? Does he deserve to be in the top 10? He really needs to be discussed more among the greats. Facts. We need Seattle back and fresh Kentucky team. All the Colonels that played in the 60s. When he went to the Lakers, he pretty much, and I think early 70s, when he went to the Lakers, he pretty much played the Bill Russell role. Yeah, he was Bill Russell in LA. Facts. Draymond Green being an all-star is the equivalent to a participation award. Yep. Do you think the season will resume in mid-July. I think it's going to. It honestly, it shouldn't, but I think it's going to. I already think that's what's gonna happen. It shouldn't, but it will. I just think that that's gonna be the case. And again, guys, continue to smash the like and hit the subscribe for your boy Louis Sports Network, man. Getting back to the article, um, it says Wilt was a shot put thrower, a champion, high jumper, track star, triple jumper. He could bench press 550 in college. The man was also in the Volleyball Hall of Fame, and he only began seriously playing that game when he was past 36 years old. The Nets back in the 80s were still actively wooing him back out of retirement to play in the league. Wilt was already 50 in an 80s Lakers exhibition scrimmages. Wilt at center held a Magic Johnson-led team scoreless. Wilt's listed 275 pounds in weight is his unupdated college weight. During his prime and his later years in the NBA, he admitted that his weight was closer to 290 to 300 pounds. The only one who could give Wilt any problem was the former track star and Olympic caliber high jumper named Bill Russell. In the late 70s, when he was in his mid to late 40s, and with the Seattle Supersonics, Bill Russell had one-on-one skirmishes with the Sonic players. He transformed each one into a virtual volleyball game, smacking down any who would be attached to the basket. Wilt would be able to dominate this current era. So let me ask y'all a question. Do you think Wilt Chamberlain in today's NBA would dominate? Let me know in the comments. Do you think if Wilt would dominate today's game in the 2010s? Of course, when compared to freaks like LeBron and Giannis, but you got to take into account that Curry's fast. He has a decent vertical, but he doesn't show it off more. He'd be trying to dunk. I mean, he's been trying to do it in playoff games. I think the NBA will try to come back, but I think it will be a fail. And well conditioned to the point that he could run off ball all game and still have the energy to put a 40 foot jumper. Excuse me. Patrick Ewing has just announced today that I know, I heard. But Russell was way better than Draymond. He had a game in the NBA Finals against the Lakers where he put 30 points and 40 rebounds. I said compared to the top players, I know he's athletic. You have to be if you're going to be able to be an NBA player. Damn. I mean, to the point that there is. Make it good. You guys are making great points, man, out there right here in the chat. So continuing with the article, it says, what would it be if a prime 7'1", 300-pound with a 55-inch vertical and a 500 bench press can do in the league now? I think he exposed the NBA for the sham that it is today. First, he definitely would lead the league in rebounding. He would average 18. Second, he'd lead the league in blocks. He'd average 6 or 7. Third, he'd lead the league in shooting percentage for guys over 15 points per game. He'd average over 60%. Fourth, he'd lead the league in free throws tried, 15 to 20 per game. Because remember, he was not a good free throw shooter, so they would foul him so that he couldn't dominate. I would wonder how today's players would guard him in terms of trying to deny him the ball. He would also lead the league in minutes. He would lead the league in minutes played at 45 a game. No center could run with him. He'd average well over 20 points and a fraction over 7 assists also. And his team, no matter which one he's put on, would contend immediately. Since there are so few good centers now and a bloated 30-team league where he only plays half of them twice, the regular season would be a cakewalk. Then they'd have to figure out how to pay him. Easily the greatest player ever, the NBA today is lucky he came along earlier. Again, smash the like, hit that subscribe. Wilt was benching 465 when he was 59 years old. That's a mere 4 years before he passed away. He used to work out with Arnold the Terminator, and his bench press was over 500 when he was younger. 550, as I mentioned in college. On the set of Conan the Destroyer, and when he was around the mid-40s, he was rumored to have bench pressed 450 and beaten Arnold in weightlifting. Oh yeah, if you actually look up Google, there's actually is a pic of him with Arnold for that Conan the Destroyer film. There's a famous pic of him where he's a track star in college, showing him jumping straight up next to a high jump bar. I did see that. You could look that up on Google too. He was about 54 inches off the ground when the photo was taken and won the photographer an award. Wilt wasn't sure if he was on the way up or on the way down. Even then, when he was playing volleyball, he often be photographed spiking the ball and his waist would be over the net. That's how much of a gifted natural athlete Wilt Chamberlain was. Let me again go back into the comment section. What if a major player like AD or Kawhi catch blank? Who knows? Who knows? The King says 55-inch vertical. Damn. Will there be a one city situation for the entire league, a playing tournament situation to bring about the playoffs, everything televised with no fans in the stadium? I wonder if they're going to do that. I really do wonder if they're going to do that. So again, smash the like, hit the subscribe. Again, as always, you guys don't have to. There's my Cash App if you guys would like to donate. I'm going to leave my PayPal in the chat, and I'm going to put it in the comment section. I'm going to put it in the comment section. And Clay Pro says, damn, imagine getting punched in the face by Wilt. Exactly. That dude is a tower of a man, 7'1", 300 pounds. All right, ladies and gentlemen, so I have left the link in the chat for the PayPal if you guys would like to donate. All right, continuing to read the article. You guys have been killing it in the chat. Let me see. So it says that Wilt did weigh over 300 by the end of his career, but it was all muscle during the 72-73. His coach came up with the idea of taking him out of the game with about 2 minutes to go in the first quarter, then reinserting him after about 2 minutes had been played in the second quarter. So Wilt played the entire second half of every game that year. He was always in shape. He worked out a lot during the offseason. The guy averaged 46 minutes per game over his entire career. Today's centers wouldn't give him any problems. Dwight is the best center in the NBA today, and he has no post game. So just imagine. Wilt would definitely lead the NBA in rebounding. Nobody in the NBA has anything like the stamina that he had on or off the court. Wilt's passing was the most underrated part of his game, which is true. He led the league in assists, and he's the only center in NBA history to lead the league in assists. He also has the only 20-20-20 triple-double in NBA's history in points, rebounds, assists. He's the only non-guard to lead the NBA in assists. LeBron James would actually be the second non-guard to lead the NBA in assists if his assists stay at 10. And his ball handling skills were good enough for him to make the Harlem Globetrotters. So Wilt had skills. He could put the ball on the floor and lead the break, especially in his younger days. No doubt he'd get to the line more than anyone. No center in the NBA could guard him. They'd hack him. And shout out to the King. He says Wilt is basically a more athletic version of David Robinson, which is crazy when you think about it. And everybody knows how athletic David Robinson was. Former Defensive Player of the Year, I tell you, man. Other than Karl Malone, who was strong and ripped, David Robinson's triceps were something else. I'm telling you guys. I'm telling you. When I saw David Robinson run the floor and I see his triceps, I'm like, God damn, like those are strong. So no center in the NBA could guard Wilt. Wilt will probably get hacked a lot in today's game because they couldn't guard him. No center in the league. He could put the ball on the floor. Trust me, he'd be a nightmare to deal with. And also, Wilt shot an all-time record in the NBA, 72.7% from the field in his last season, and he averaged 13 assists He averaged 13 points per game in addition to leading the league with 19 rebounds a game. Oh, and then I mentioned he played all 82 games in his last season. If Kwame Brown can carve out a 10-year career for himself in today's NBA, then you tell me just how tough it is under the hoop. It'd be a cakewalk for Wilt Chamberlain. Having said that, it's entirely possible that he might throw it all away for a rap career. He had a lot of interest besides basketball. Truth is, it would be easier today for Wilt, not harder. Today's game runs less now than it did in the 60s. And Wilt was a better athlete than anyone now. This is a three-point league. When we get into transition, a lot of teams love to shoot three-point shots. It's really not even really much about even really the easy layup anymore in today's games. There's some quotes about Wilt's strength. We go into a dressing room and see a box score from the night before where Wilt had 55 or 60 points. No one would think twice about that. Getting 50 some points or even 60 wasn't news when he did it. First time I guarded Wilt, I stood behind him and he was so wide that I couldn't see the rest of the game. Then I saw him dunk a ball so hard that it hit the court and bounced straight up back through the rim again. I still remember the time when one of our strongest men, Gene Conley, decided to fight Chamberlain for the ball. He grabbed it and hung on, and Chamberlain just lifted him and ball right up towards the rim. People lose sight of the fact that Wilt was a 440 champion, a guy with great coordination. He also was so strong that the double teaming defenses used today would not bother him. I mean, the guy was benching freaking 450 even when he retired. That's crazy. I know a guy who ran a 9.1 in the 100-yard dash at 17 growing up. You will find superior athletes. It's up to how you handle yours because the Lord hands all gifts out. Make the best. You got to make the best of the gifts that God has been giving you. Washington News is absolutely right. Whatever end up happening to that guy? Good question. And shout out to Ron. He says, I remember in Wilt's first season, he was playing the role of the defensive center, and somebody said that he couldn't score anymore because of his age. And the next game, he dropped 45 points. It just goes to show you how Wilt was able to be dominant on both ends of the floor. He's just widely known for his offensive prowess. But he was very dominant. Again, smash the like, hit the subscribe button, man, for the Louis Sports Network. This has been a solid chat. It's been pretty solid. Okay, so obviously Wilt played, 14 seasons in the NBA. He retired in 1973. And, obviously it went to that. So that was the story on Wilt Chamberlain. So, yeah, Wilt Chamberlain played against some great centers in his time. They just don't get enough credit because it will make it seem like if he just went against a bunch of white guys. But that's really not the case. Especially, it's even funny because some people are saying he was the Michael Jordan and LeBron of his sport. It was like he was the best and most dominant player, like Jordan, and he could put up LeBron-type numbers. That's how dominant Wilt Chamberlain was. They're saying you can make the case that Wilt was a dominant version of both Jordan and LeBron James. What he gets compared to today, right? So it's unbelievable. Now, if we get to these guys right here, if we look at the history of the game, the most dominant centers to have ever played for the Lakers are George Mikan, Shaquille O'Neal, Wilt Chamberlain, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. I just named you four. The four most dominant centers, the greatest to ever play. Right there, as you guys can see. Now, the issue with LeBron James is that the greatest small forward to ever play for that organization is Elgin Baylor. He just doesn't get enough credit because he didn't win. And unfortunately, he retired 9 games into the 72 season. He would have been a part of history with Wilt and with Jerry West. And they were a big three. He could have been part of 33 straight games, winning. And he could have been part of a 69-win team that beat the Knicks in 72 to win the NBA title. And as I mentioned, one of Wilt's accomplishments, he was the Finals MVP in 1972. He has 4 regular season MVPs. So when you combine the 4 regular season MVPs with a Finals MVP, Wilt's got 5. And unfortunately, had Wilt won more, he would have multiple Finals MVPs, and Wilt would probably be a Mount Rushmore player right now. It's crazy because Wilt and Shaq are 2 players who could have been Mount Rushmore players. So it's like, as great as those guys are, they kind of left off a lot on the table. Jermaine says Wilt should have won more, man. And Wilt was also called Goliath. He is Goliath. And Wilt should have won more. It's true. Now that Wilt's career is over, now let's get to the expansion era. Okay, now that I want to get to the expansion era, the reason I wanted to get to this is because I've noticed that people have been trying to discredit championships off of this guy. Where is his name at? They have been trying to discredit. They have been trying to discredit Jordan, right? They have been trying to discredit this guy right here, who most people would obviously call the greatest to ever do it, right? MJ, Michael Jordan, correct? Correct. Keep smashing that like and keep hitting that subscribe, man, as you guys come in for the Louis Sports Network. And once again, shout out to Clay Pro with the donation. Appreciate it, man. Gave a $20 donation. Truly appreciate Clay Pro on that one, man. Clay Pro is the man. Appreciate it. Do people forget that in the expansion era? Let's go through the expansion era, shall we? When we have the NBA expansion era, we have, check this out. There were only 11 teams when the league started in the 46-47 season. The very next year, it went down to 8 teams. So 3 teams were gone. Then it went from 8 to 12 teams in 48-49. Then in the 49-50 season, they jumped up to 17 teams in the NBA. Then in the 50-51 season, it went down to, they removed 6 teams and it became 11 teams in the NBA. Then from 11 to 10 from 51 to 53. Then from 53 to 55, it went down to 9. And then it went from 1955 to 1961, there were 8 teams in the NBA. And then from 61 to 66, there were 9 teams. So 1950 had 17 teams, but by 1966, we were in a 9-team league. Then if you have the 66-67 season, that's when expansion really started to take place. It was 10 teams. Then by 1968, we had 12 teams. Then by 1970, we had 14 teams. Then by 1974, we had 17 teams from 70 to 74. By 1976, we had 18 teams. And then by 1980 to by 1980, it was a 22-team league. So expansion really started to take place in 1967 to 1981. We went from 10 to 22 teams, 10 to 23 teams during that time period. And a shout out to Jermaine who says, nice pick, appreciate it. His name was David Martin, and yes, he was just as gifted, man. So was his sister Donna, if you know what I mean. Oh my God. All right, thank you for the info, Washable News. Appreciate it. All right. What was I going? Okay. Getting back to the expansion era. So this is why people are saying that during those early years, there was a lot of moving from a lot of these organizations in the very beginning. The modern expansion is from 1981 to the current present, because currently, by 2004, we had 30 teams. By 2004, we had 30 teams in the league. But remember, from 1981 to 2004, we got 8 teams. So in 24 seasons, 8 teams were included in the NBA. Eight teams were included in the NBA from 80 to 89. It's pretty crazy. Again, keep smashing that like and keep hitting that subscribe, man, for the Louis Sports Network. All right, let's keep it going, people. We got 8 people watching. We got 17 people liking the video. Nice solid amount of likes. Let's continue to push this content up. Let's continue to get more subscribers. Truly appreciate you guys taking the time for being here and doing this with me right here on the Louis Sports Network. Let me see. So like I was saying, look, Chicago Bulls were the team that was the team that came in '66. But look at the teams that we got. We got the Seattle Supersonics, who are now the Oklahoma City Thunder. We got the Phoenix Suns, the Milwaukee Bucks, the Buffalo Braves came in. They're known as the Clippers because they went to San Diego. The Cavaliers, Portland Trailblazers, New Orleans Jazz, which is now Utah. You have the ABA-NBA merger, which was with the Brooklyn Nets, Indiana Pacers, Denver Nuggets, San Antonio Spurs. That's 4 teams right there. The Dallas Mavericks came in 1980. They were the 23rd team in the 1980s. From 88 to 89, we had 25 teams. 2 more teams were included. That would include the Charlotte Hornets, the Miami Heat, Charlotte Hornets, Miami Heat. You have Orlando Magic and the Minnesota Timberwolves. All those teams came during the expansion era. And what's killing me is Michael Jordan gets discredited because of the era that he played in, but they don't want to take into account of the fact that all these teams, if you look at Magic Johnson and Larry Bird, and if you're going to hold that against Michael Jordan in terms of the expansion era, saying that it was completely watered down, Isaiah Thomas and the Pistons won 2 championships when in the last 2 seasons prior to them winning, the league expanded to 4 more teams. And Ron says you have to take into account that back in the day, people weren't really feeling basketball, and it took many years for it to take off, which is true. It really took off with Magic and Bird. They were the NBA saviors. Michael turned it into a global phenomenon. It's true. Nobody was really into basketball like that at the time. That's true. Basketball was not the popular sport that it became during Bird, Magic, and Jordan's time. And then we saw the beautiful cream of crop players that came in the 80s, especially at that small forward position. That joint was deep. Basketball is the best sport to me. And he says, facts, Lou. So this is why I give credit to Wilt Chamberlain in his era. He played against Hall of Fame centers. Again, he just towered over everybody because he was 7'1", when the average NBA center was 6'10" back in the 60s, back in the 50s and 60s. And the thing is, we cannot blame players for the era that they, obviously were born in. But getting into that expansion era, the only 2 teams that came in the 90s were the Vancouver Grizzlies, who ended up moving to Memphis, and then you have the Toronto Raptors, who came in. Both of those teams came in the 95-96 season. But the league had 27 teams by the time that Jordan was winning. But like I said, those expansion teams came into, they were from 1980 to 2004. 8 teams were added to the NBA, and people forget that 3 teams from the ABA were added to the league because the league was not popular, and the ABA actually made more money than the NBA did at one point, and the games were much more exciting in the ABA than the NBA, and the NBA was a drug-infested league. As a matter of fact, the 70s have the most. I believe the 70s had the most fights of any era. There were a lot of fights in the 70s and 80s. And obviously you had some in the 90s and the 2000s, obviously, but the 70s had more fights than any era. So the 60s was probably the most physical. The 70s had more fights, had more drug users, and it had a dark image for the league at the time. The 80s was the golden age of the NBA because it was not only physical, but it was a beautiful, fast-paced game to watch. And obviously, like I said, the players that were in that era made the NBA such an entertaining showcase. So again, smash the like button, hit the subscribe button, as you guys come in. And so we're talking about the expansion era as well. So obviously we got the New Orleans Pelicans, because when they came in, then they actually moved to Charlotte. So the reason that I'm mentioning the expansion era, ladies and gentlemen, is because of this. What I'm trying to tell you guys is that what needs to happen is we can't act like, you know, this that if Jordan is going to be held accounted for championships in a much more weaker in a weak quote unquote weak 90s with the myth and that he took advantage of expansive errors. Shout out to Ryan who's here. Shout out to Ryan Powers against Master Light. He says Wilt isn't even top 10,000. Why you say that? I'm interested to hear you, Ron. Why isn't Wilt top 1,000? Top 10,000, I should say. Yeah, so when you include this expansion era, 18s came in from 80 to 2004. So that's why we've come to know the 30-team league that we do today. Shout out to Ron. He says, I was watching 30 for 30 earlier, the one with the Celtics and Russell, and it was tough. Even though the Celtics were winning all those chips, they weren't the biggest draw in Boston. The Bruins were. That just lets you know how basketball was not too popular even in Boston. Lets you know right there, you know? So yeah, when we talk about this modern NBA, man, it's crazy. People also forget that remember the racial tension that existed during that time period too. There was a lot of racial tension in Wilt's era, you know, in the era he played in. You know, so we got to also take that into account, ladies and gentlemen. Like I said, man, shout out to everybody that's been watching. Shout out to everybody that's taking the time to listen during that chat. And Jermaine says Boston was racist too. They didn't like Bill Russell. Yeah, exactly. And that's something that Bill had to deal with while he was a player, while he was a coach. Fortunately, Red Auerbach had his back during that time, and he appreciated Bill for his ability to pretty much play. And I remember that. I know, I know that Red Auerbach. I mean, he would talk just wondrous things about Bill Russell and his greatness, and why he called him. I think he called him the greatest player to ever play in basketball history. Out of respect for Bill Russell, the reason I put him up as an exception into my top 10 is the fact that he was impactful as a rebounder and defensive player. And to be honest with you, a lot of guys wouldn't be in the Hall of Fame. To be honest with you, let me just put it this way, that even though Bill played with more offensively talented players, the Celtics would not be known as the champions that they are if Bill Russell's not on that team. You take him off, they're not the same team. So even though Bill shot 44%, and I can't accept that for somebody of his caliber, for him being known for layups and dunks, like I said, his defense and his impact rebounding led to those 11 championships. And it was like no matter how much the roster changed, well, and the thing is, what's fortunate about Bill, he was able to play with the player. There was no free agency. Fortunately for Bill Russell, I will say that. And obviously, he's not in control of that. That's not his fault. You know, it's not his fault at all. You know, he couldn't deal with that. So he was not in control of that. And remember, free agency didn't even exist until 1989. That was when that was the expansion era when those teams came in. 6 teams came from 1988 to 1995. But what Isaiah Thomas loves to fail to mention is he disrespects his own era and will always talk about the expansion teams against Jordan. Well, Isaiah Thomas fails to realize that those expansion teams also came at the cost of you winning championships too. Because at the very least, but I will say this in retrospect to Isaiah, at least, and besides, Jordan, if you look at when he played, and we go back to the peace to Louis Sports and everybody here. All right, shout out to Washable News. Take care. See you later, bro. See you later. Wait, did I see a thumbnail change? No, the thumbnail change you see there. Well, I had to put Jordan because it was about the era. The red called my name. Yeah, according to your emoji, Bill Russell was a main cog to the team game despite his shortcomings offensively. That's the key thing. When I just think of his effect on his team and his impact, that's why I have Bill Russell at number three all time. That's the respect I have for him. Then when more and more blacks came into the league, people were saying, no, these guys are showboating. The game wasn't meant to be played that way. And and that was another setback. Man, take care, Watchful News. Deuces, man. Again, man, keep smashing that like button. We got 18 likes, which is pretty solid. You guys did a wonderful job. Appreciate you guys. And like I said, shout out to Clay Pro once again for the donation. I truly appreciate that. Thank you, Clay Pro. I will say this about Layla. She knows how to make a grand entrance into a party. Yes, she does. I ain't going nowhere. Just chilling like, bro, man. Ah, like I said, man, keep smashing that like and hit that subscribe. So yeah, with Wilt Chamberlain, deserves his respect. 23 teams by 1980. By 1989, it was 27 teams. Four of them, one was added. I believe Charlotte was added before the 86, I think for the 86-87 season. And in 88-89, we had the Heat, Orlando. So the Heat, the Magic, and the Minnesota Timberwolves. So she said, I'm still here like an unpaid bill. Had an engagement? Huh. Oh, that's nice. So, like I said, if we're gonna hold this against Jordan in terms of the whole expansion era, then you're gonna have to hold that against Bird, Magic, and Isaiah and Dr. J. For those guys who won NBA championships too, because they're part of the modern era, and the expansion teams started to expand during their time. You got to also remember about the merger with the three teams coming from the ABA. And remember that they did this because they wanted more excitement in the league. They thought more teams in the league, there'd be more fans to kind of follow, especially if you have fans in different states. The red just calls you because it's MJ. By the way, red is actually my favorite color. For those who don't know, that's a Lewis fun fact. Red is my favorite color. Just letting y'all know out there. I mean, doesn't Jordan just look good in red? I mean, that's what Layla would say, right? Ron says, I was watching the 30 for 30 series with the Celtics and the Lakers, Bird, and Magic right now. Good stuff. Yeah, it really is good stuff. I like also the documentary between Magic and Bird that's called A Courtship of Rivals. That's another good one if you guys haven't seen that one. That's another good one. Layla says that unpaid bill watchful. We know how we love that water bill, right? We love that water bill. To me, expansion should mean more competition. Yeah, but they're gonna say because there were a lot of bad teams that the competition was kind of watered down. I'm like, to be honest with you, Magic Johnson doesn't get discredited for the amount of final trips he made with the amount of competition he had in the Western Conference. There weren't a lot of teams that competed with the Lakers. The Lakers were more. If you look at that Western Conference and the one that Magic dominated in, going to the finals 9 times, the better competition for Magic and them was once it got kind of going into the 90s because the West was not as strong as it was in the 90s. I felt like the Western Conference was stronger in the 90s than it was in the 80s. And if you look at the finals runs for Magic and the one for LeBron, their conferences are kind of comparable when you consider that Magic went to 9 finals in 12 years. LeBron went to 9 finals overall, including 8 straight. But the difference between the two of them is that Magic won 5 and LeBron has 3. That's the difference. So expansion should mean more it should be more competition. I mean, so like it's like look at it. They're like the less teams it's stacked, and man, then you got to look at these other teams. That's why you think it's a blessing that you have fans from 30 states because now you get to see a whole lot of different teams. That's actually good for the league to have this many teams, even though they want to say that it's watered down, quote unquote. Facts. They are the best docs ever. Got here late, number 12 on the check-in. Layla says red is my favorite color, Louis. My car is vibrant red. Oh, that's nice. Yeah, Jermaine, they say anything to support their narrative. Ron says a lot of great players were playing in the ABA, and that also hurt the NBA some too. That's right. Late like me, but had to come support. Jermaine, exactly. The 90s had the most 50 and 60 plus win teams and the toughest road to the title than any other decade. Do you remember that people forget now that we have due to the 1980 before right after 1984, I believe. Yeah, was it 1984? Yes. No, no, no. For the 83-84 season, it was the very first time that we actually got a quarterfinal round. So now we had 4 rounds instead of 3 because in the 60s it was 2 to 3 rounds. In the 60s and 70s it was in the 60s and 70s up to 1983 it was 3 rounds. It was 3 rounds, right? Watchful News says Ron Cowan, great point. Example, Dr. J. Preach, bro. Let's be real. It was the Celtics, the Lakers, and the Pistons, the Bulls, and the Warriors. We'd want to come correct. What other teams have dominated? The Celtics, late 50s and 60s. The Lakers in the 80s. The Bulls in the 90s. The Warriors in the 2010s. The Lakers and the Spurs of the 99 of the Spurs from 99 to 2014, and then you got the Lakers. The Spurs and the Lakers pretty much were the 2000s. They won 7 out of the 10 NBA championships. You know, so it's true. If you look at the 90s, there's more 50 and 60 win teams in this period. It's crazy, huh? And people have to also remember that back then you were playing each other much more times than you are in a 30-team league. Because now when you're doing 30 teams in your own conference, you're playing teams 3 to 4 times, whereas the opposite conference, the opposing conference, you're only playing twice a season. So it's a lot different now when it comes to scheduling and who are your rivals in your conference and how many times you play them. It's very different now than it's very different than compared to what it was back then. I mean, because if you look at also, if y'all remember what Jordan was saying in the '89 season, teams were playing each other in terms of rivals. The Bulls and the Pistons played each other 6 times. The Cavs played the Bulls 6 times in the '89 season, and the Bulls lost all 6 games. Excuse me. And people need to understand is that the game evolves. Layla says forgot the Spurs, my bad, but who else? It really isn't a lot. Philly to an extent, and others with a ring or two here or there. Yeah, kind of spread out. Flashpoint Paradox is the greatest DC story ever. Joel Hayward says 4 teams in the 97-98 season won over 60 games, the most in one season. And what Joel is talking about is that in the Western Conference, you had 3 60-win teams. That would be the Lakers, the Sonics, and the Jazz. In the Bulls, it was just one team, and that was them. In the Eastern Conference, it was the Bulls, 62 and 20. The Lakers and the Supersonics had 61 wins each, and the Jazz had 62. Think about this, folks. The Jazz and the Bulls had the same amount of wins, and the Lakers and the Supersonics had the same amount of wins in the same season. 3 out of those 4 teams were in the Western Conference. Oh, he was on another one? No doubt. All right. Oh, so yeah, but not dominating. So it's a great point. It's a good point. You know? So like I said, I'm not going to discredit Jordan for the fact that he had his championships. Can't do that. Like some of these players got to take advantage on that era too. So that's what people need to understand. And once again, ladies and gentlemen, continue to smash the like button and continue to hit the subscribe button, man, for the Louis Sports Network. We talked about Wilt Chamberlain and his era and why his era is kind of gets discredited, especially with the centers he went up against. And we're talking about the expansion era and looking at it as I can't say that the 90s was as watered down as people are making it claim out to be when this was starting to happen in the 80s. And to be honest with you, 2 teams came into in the 90s and 1 team came into the 2000s, while teams were moving here and there. But in 1980, we started with 23 teams. We had 29 teams by 1996. That basically tells you that 4 out of those 6 teams were put in the 80s. But nobody wants to talk about that, which is what considered the modern era is. And we says, was it 28 or 29 teams in the 90s? By 1996, it was 29 teams by 96. We didn't get to 30 until 2004. But we had 23 teams by 1980. That's why when Isaiah Thomas disrespects Jordan, he doesn't fail to mention that 3 expansion teams came the year when he won the NBA title in 1989. And then they won again in 1990. Doesn't that help, your record to Isaiah Thomas? You can't be that sounds like a hypocrite too. I get it. But like I said, nothing to take away from Isaiah's greatness, no question. So Layla says, facts, Louis, and they claim, oh, living in the past. Nope, we're not older like they claim. So what's the excuse? Joel says, during the Bulls run, they beat 3 50-plus winning teams 4 times and beat 3 60-plus winning teams 3 times. But you know what they're going to say when they consider looking at the people don't understand that the 90s was more parity. There was more parity in the league in the 90s. To be honest with you, they just say that there were a lot of guys with no skill. And it's like, I disagree with that. There were a lot of skilled guys in the 90s. I think from Jordan, what they look at is that they weren't as skilled at his position. That's probably what they probably say about that they weren't as skilled at his position. If you look at the 90s, the 90s had some of the best power forwards and centers to ever play this game. And I agree with you, Jermaine. At the end of the day, you got to go out and play because people are going to use a certain argument for their favorite player when it comes to. And I said that you just cannot blame people. You can't blame players for the era that they grew up in. You can't do that. So yeah, when you really listen to it, does the 90s really sound that watered down? And people also forget zones were being played in the 90s. They were just used more for situational. Because the thinking back then was that you can guard your man. And you could talk about the illegal defense, but that was the mentality. Because zones are to guard spots on the floor. Remember, a zone defense is supposed to stop penetration. supposed to stop penetration and not allow a center to pack in the paint. But there was zone being played in the 90s. They're just not played at the level that it started to play at once they implemented the defensive 3-second rule with Shaq. You still got to go out there and play. Athletic-wise, due to modern medicine, maybe you all, but intelligence-wise, hell no. There's less preparation today. And like I said, I feel like IQ was better back then than it is today. I agree. And they play less games and they get injured more. If you look at today's players, there's a lot more injuries now than there were actually back in the day, which is very interesting. They may be more skilled, but you know, that's what I find pretty funny. Players coming out of high school more than ever, the game has dimmed down to play to these stars level, man, but they are more athletic. Yeah. And Jermaine says 90s had it all. Iconic players, great jerseys, great nicknames, etc. Exactly, my man. Exactly. So yeah, I had to show my face. You know, I was telling the chat earlier, much earlier. I know some of you guys got to see me during quarantine time with the big beard and all that, but decided to cut, get a trim. The next type of haircut I'm gonna get is actually gonna be when I grow my hair again and I grow my beard, and I'm actually gonna get myself a little taper fade. I think it's gonna look dope, especially with the hair that I'm gonna have. I'm actually gonna bring back a high school look that I haven't had in a long time since high school, and I think with the way that I am now, grown, I think it'll actually look good. So, you know, I think I pretty much am gonna put it that way. So, I can't wait to grow my hair again, and I definitely can't wait to grow the beard again, and then pretty much get it shaped and lined up. And with the hair grown, it's gonna look pretty dope. So I can't wait for that. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, I'm gonna put a close down to this stream. I want to appreciate everybody coming through tonight. You guys have been great. You know, definitely continue to like, continue to subscribe. Make sure that your notifications are always turned on when you guys receive my videos. And Layla's like, no, I like my guy clean cut. I said, listen. I'll be clean cut with hair. There'll be a difference. I just decided to do clean cut this time around. I'll be clean cut just with hair. Different. But that's just me. So like I said, I want to thank everybody for coming through. Really. Salon's coming back this Monday. They said things have kind of like simmered down a bit. Great stream as always. Appreciate it. Appreciate it. All right, ladies and gentlemen. So this was your boy Louis with another one, coming back tomorrow with another one with another video. I'm talking about Horace Grant and Scottie Pippen. Gotta come back with this one. Horace Grant, Scottie Pippen, and Craig Hodges coming on Michael Jordan. Definitely gonna come through with that one. So ladies and gentlemen, this is your boy Louis. Like, subscribe, continue to share. You know what? You know how I do, man. And I'm gonna actually do the model where you guys can see it. Appreciate you guys. Always checking the channel. You guys kept it lit up in here. All right, ladies and gentlemen, be back tomorrow. Same time, same channel. You know how it be. From the Louis Sports Network. Bless up. Live, laugh, love. Thank y'all for watching. Have a wonderful night, and I will see you back later on tomorrow. Take care, everybody. Have a wonderful night. And for those who don't know what I look like until now, there it is. Nice and clean cut. But like I said, I will be back better than ever with a new style in the later coming months. But continue to subscribe to the channel, social media, and on Reddit. Deuces, everybody. Have a wonderful night. Super fun to see everybody as always, man. Gonna continue bringing that heat, continue to bring that knowledge, continue to bring the commentary on the Louis Sports Network, man.